Hello world, welcome to JustDavid's personal commentary. It's time to get ready for me to weigh in on what I previously described as toxic feminism, or as I've been thinking of it, the feminism of inequality. As far as I know, there may be one person who's been waiting on this video. I do have to say that this video isn't backed up by much more than my own observations and assertions, but it's how I see a part of what helped cause Gamergate. I would like to note that as I was scripting this video, the Federalists addressed many of these points I'm going to bring up in It's Time to Push Back Against Feminist Bullies by Molly Hemingway. There will be a link to this article in the video description, and I do encourage you to go and read it. I see the phenomenon happening in gaming as similar to the rise of Atheism Plus in the scientific atheist YouTube community and related conventions. The behavior I see is a woman who loudly declares herself as a feminist, who steps up and denounces something involved in the community, typically a non-problem or something that you have to be easily offended to find offensive. Of course, this isn't allowed to be a personal issue for that person. No, they cry that all women need to be protected from this, or declare the behavior something that has to be curbed to keep women from being victimized. Then they wait for the usual reaction of the internet to anything. Concern, comments, opposing claims, and most vitally to them, harassment. Note, harassment is a thing that you will experience on the internet, especially if you make loud public declarations against anything. You can even get harassed just for commenting on popular articles and videos. The Factual Feminist covers this nicely in Is the Internet Unsafe for Women? I will be providing a link to this video in the description. When these women do get harassed, they immediately turn around and blame everyone that disagrees with them and use it to support their claims of toxic behavior in the community that they're accusing of sexism. They rally people to protect them and decry their opposition as vile, and with these white knights behind them, push their agenda onto the community they've involved themselves with. In atheism and gaming, they seem to know better than to call for laws like those who tried to bring about legislation against violent video games. They try to create social pressures so people will start enforcing their suggestions and agenda and voluntarily remove the things that they decry. Now, I can't attribute any one goal behind this. There are several distinct possible motivations for these people that spring to mind. One is they think that what's going on is honestly true to the narrative they're creating. I will suggest that this is a thing of delusion. Others may be attention seekers, eager to grab as much attention as they can by being in the center of a controversy. Some are likely to be actively trying to create inequality favoring women, and then there are those who will be seeking to profit in some manner from these activities. The most critical part of their interactions, however, is the way they try to shut down every criticism brought against their narrative, silencing genuine critics and counterclaims along with the usual rabble of internet stupidity that is best ignored rather than given attention. The most dangerous part of this is the seeming ease with which these feminists of inequality have seemed to rally people to mindlessly defend them and their shoddy claims and cries of victimization. Even people who suffered such supposed victimizing actions themselves rush to defend these women from everyone that they declare as harassers on the flimsiest claims, or even claims with absolutely no merit to them at all. I would also like to note that being arrayed against something calling itself feminism has another issue involved. There are plenty of other people out there, non-gamers, who see these feminists of inequality being resisted and rush in to prop up the other side. Some of these people will share my views of what's happening here. Others have fought and lost in the face of this inequality. Some are griefers and trolls looking to blow things up, and some are straight-up misogynists. I will once again state that Gamergate is not responsible for the fact that these people will get themselves involved, and the fact that these forces opposed to this feminism of inequality, or even all feminism, trying to champion our cause does not delegitimize our concerns or voices, and proclaiming that it does is little more than another dishonest silencing tactic. This feminism of inequality seemed to become another opiate of the masses. It bears the hallmarks of the contest between objective scientific inquiry and dogmatic religious resistance to the results of scientific pursuits. Those who follow are encouraged to attack. Feminist studies, like the creationist and Christian studies before them, are worried about finding whatever information they can use to support the pre-selected conclusions while discarding even overwhelming evidence that does not. Although the so-called creationist scientists wish that they could keep denying the counter-evidence is satanic in the way this feminism of inequality decries it as part of the patriarchy. The patriarchy seems to serve only to make the claims of these feminists of inequality unfalsifiable. Either the taint of patriarchy renders your point invalid because it reinforces the sexism of the patriarchy, or somehow it actually supports their claims because of the patriarchy. If there's a legitimate use of this term, as they aren't actually decrying the system of patriarchy in these claims, then I've never seen it, and I've seen dozens of intellectually dishonest uses. One of the reasons I attach the descriptor of inequality to this version of feminism is because it always forces everything into the context of it happening to women. Even when we know such things can affect everyone, it's only about how horrible it is when it happens to women. Harassment, insults, looking at someone, the unequal representation of women in any workforce where they have lower numbers, except in almost any field of hard labor. However, the way they approach these issues often either stupidly ignores the idea that we should be working for all genders to be helped with these things, or the implied concept that it doesn't matter if these things happen to men. This focus is used to push for the marginalization of men or their ability to act in certain ways that aren't actually harmful. Sure, some of these actions are rude and disrespectful, but acting like men are the only gender capable of being rude and disrespectful is just as stupid as claiming that non-white people can't be racist. So we see a pattern of drawing fire, using that fire to rally support, and decry everyone not on their side. Then attempts to apply unequal solutions to problems that likely weren't even problems in the first place, so that men are disempowered in favor of giving women absurd levels of protection. If this behavior wasn't so readily supported by those riding to the rescue, it would be a non-event. Just like the trolls were supposed to ignore, if these people weren't indulged, then things would either get better on their own, or more rational people could approach any real problems in ways that don't split the communities into us and them camps. I would like to say that I'm actually in favor of using discriminatory practices to help address imbalances for a certain duration of time. There aren't as many women developers making games, but there's also a lot more male developers entering the field than female developers. And let us not forget to consider that there may be a gender-based, unequal level of desire to enter certain fields. Without research, decrying inequality in certain fields as having to be made equal is a matter of opinion. One that I grant should prompt multiple investigations into the issue, but where one should be open to both the possibilities that this is because of sexism excluding a gender, or that it is merely a product of one gender having more interest in the field than the other. But back to gaming. Creating programs and hiring incentives for the female developers is inherently unfair to the male developers at this point. However, the industry as a whole will probably benefit from creating more gender diversity in developers and creating an environment where original games made by women can be funded at anywhere near AAA development budgets. Hopefully to the point where women will be developing games in the traditional genres, as well as splitting into genres more interesting to the average woman. Note that the hidden object adventure games are considered games for women, although I imagine they also attract casual players or older players due to the mechanically softer nature of the gameplay. Still, this issue of gender imbalance of higher budget games is something I think we should apply some inequality to remedy. However, vilifying men for making games that have elements and characters they enjoy, and yes, this does include sexy women, and yes, it does include sexy women in skimpy clothing, is ludicrous, especially when plenty of women also enjoy these games. Gaming has had accusations like these leveled at it before, saying games cause violent behavior because they have violence. Sexualized images and violent games with sexualized images in them don't cause sexist problems. To say otherwise, you need to bring proof to the party, not some handful of baseless assertions that don't even seem to be backed by the feminist research I previously disparaged. What causes the kind of sexism, misogyny, and serious demeaning of women isn't video games. They should not be contributing to it on any notable scale, except in the case of stupidly extreme outliers. No, if you really care about when women are being abused, treated as less than human, or reduced to nothing other than their physical beauty, then you need to address the way people acting like that are raised and the environments they are a part of. It's often abuse in their family or some tragic personal event early in their life and the subsequent relationships they form that cause and reinforce these toxic behaviors. It's hard to end abusive relationships. There's a reason it's often called being trapped in an abusive relationship. Even if someone does leave one, often they find themselves forming another. This isn't because men or women are awful, it's because humans are creatures of habits, and these can be habits that are very harmful to us. Most people who keep repeating these abusive relationships don't have the ability to see when someone is just going to recreate that relationship, and they need to learn this, or they need to find someone they can trust to help them avoid such relationships in the future. Once they are able to be outside of those harmful relationships, they can start learning how to stop going back to them. However, that abusive relationship is what feels normal to them. It can take a lot of effort to get used to that being gone. It's a habit and an addiction. The world outside of those relationships is new, and it can feel like it is unnatural and something is missing. If you can rally so many people behind what I and many other people see as non-issues in gaming, why can't you help everyone be able to stop real-life abuse? I think that abuse is one of the largest problems holding humanity back as a species. On a personal observation, my mother was friends with a woman, and her husband was psychologically abusive to her. While my mother was able to stand up to him and stay with her friend, since there was no evidence of physical abuse, there was nothing to be done. My mother's friend didn't know she was being abused. She'd been raised in a dogmatic Christian environment that taught her to never question her husband. Even if she had known, it was the only life she had ever known, and leaving the only life you've ever known can be very scary. His behavior continued even when she was dying of cancer, and there was evidence of neglect and such bad housekeeping that it could have been considered dangerous. But the nurses, the female nurses that came in to take care of her, wouldn't report this, and some of them even said they wouldn't back up my mother if she reported this abuse. These are problems we need to rally around to be able to effectively call out this kind of domestic abuse. Although, however this is done needs to be very circumspect to not be abusable through false reporting or usable as a tool of revenge or malice. I want this problem solved, but it will butt up against freedoms and civil rights. But I think it's something we should be looking at very closely to see if we can create methods that aren't infringing on people's rights, or if this is such a big problem that we should implement a system where one's rights, regardless of gender, can be compromised in the face of such abuse. Although great care is called for even in considering setting up such a system. After all, creating a system that can compromise someone's rights can be a very dangerous thing to do. So this whole feminist inequality brouhaha about gaming, trying sexism and some kind of reinforcement of a fictional patriarchy on a medium that's been held up as non-causal on behavior several times over? When video games were being decried for causing violence, at least then the opposing side brought their own sad and flawed studies of video games to the table. This behavior is a sad thing in face of trying to help the real victims and to try and correct real problems in society and people's lives. It not only ignores everything that would help those truly victimized, it's splitting apart gaming with an irrational ideology designed to create inequality. So that's that. I doubt many anti-Gamergaters are ever going to see this, but it might be a nice perspective piece for anyone wondering why someone like me would be siding with Gamergate. As for my next videos, more focused on feminism. Expect 2 videos on tropes versus women going over the same video with 2 different approaches. I'll make a separate video to describe what these are going to be about. If you think I've brought something worth sharing to the table, please like the video and share it around. Your help will be appreciated, and thanks for watching.